Hello, welcome to Engineer's Box. Now today we're going to actually be having a look at something quite a bit different to normal. As most of you might know, following me on Twitter, I've been discussing recently about representing quantum superposition within Minecraft. Now if you don't get this concept, then it's okay. This is probably for a very few amount of people. So if you don't understand it, then that's fine. But I will leave a couple of things in the description if you are curious about it. But basically, the basic principle of quantum superposition is it comes from an experiment done by, well, a famous experiment, not necessarily first done by a guy called Schrödinger, a German, where he theorized that a cat inside of a box with a radioactive isotope would both be dead and alive at the same time. And the only way we'd ever know that that the cat would be dead or alive is that if we opened the box and had a look and see if it was dead or alive. Now, obviously this is quite a broad extrapolation of what the principle actually is. And the principle really describes particles. Typically, light. So in this case, light can either be a photon, which is a particle, or a wave. Something like EMR, electromagnetic radiation, like X-rays, gamma rays, visible light, all of those things, microwaves, so forth. So pretty much what happens is the light is in a superposition when it has never been measured before. Keep in mind that this is the fundamental key thing about this, is that it only works when it's never been measured before, so when it's never been looked at before. So as soon as you look at it, you can never put it back into the superposition. Well, as far as we know. Anyway, so basically what happens is before anything is ever looked at or measured it, as the term is, before that's ever happened, it's in a state of flux of both wave and particle. So basically what we've got is this kind of double position. Now, the universe, as we know, kind of allows for this. However, as soon as it becomes critical of another thing, so it becomes measured, then it breaks down to one of the two states. So it could either be a photon or a wave. Now, the famous double slit experiment basically proved this hypothesis, that light is both a wave and a particle at the same time. Now, what the scientists did was that they had a double slit, much like this one over here, where they have two slits in the wall. So what they did was, through the first one, they passed light through, and they found that it formed just like a single beam on the other side, like this. And you would think, yep, okay, that sounds pretty normal. Nothing abnormal about that. And they did the same for the other one over here, and they got another just straight up beam of light on the other side. Well, particle, where the particles hit the wall. However, when they passed it through both slits at the same time, an interesting thing happened. It produced an interference pattern. Now, the best way to show this is just with a couple of different colored wools. So we'll just grab some yellow, some orange, some red, and some black. So yellow being the most intense spot. Well, actually, what happened was the most intense spot was here in between the two slits, and then it decreased in intensity as it went further away. And we can see that this is the next dense spot, and it would form an interference pattern, something like this, which was really, really bizarre. Now, this is obviously a very condensed version of the pattern, since it's quite long. But what you have is basically, so this is where the most particles hit in this area, and then it drops off a little bit, and then it picks up a little bit in a spike, as you can see, represented over here. Now, this is what it would actually look like, something along these lines, where you have a really major part where there's a lot of light, which then, as you can see, the peaks, these are the most amount of particles. Then these are a bit less over here, which then go to a trough, and then a few more, and a few more than this, and then back down to a trough. So it forms a pattern kind of like this, an interference pattern. Now, the weird thing about this was that even if they passed the particles through the slit one at a time, they would still get this interference pattern, and it just boggled scientists at the time. What they found out was that it was actually in these both states at once. So when it passed through, it acted as a wave so that it went through both of them as once. Hence, the water over here, which is what we've got here, which is a representation of it. So you got this interference pattern. So basically what I've done is recreated this in Minecraft. So what we've got here is a little reconstruction. It's not 100% accurate, and for some reason the animation on the water is broken. Fair enough, whatever. So what we've got is, this is not an accurate representation. Not accurate whatsoever, but it does illustrate the point. Now I will show you a slightly more accurate one over there later on. But basically what you have is water, and it flows through these 2 points here. Now obviously water doesn't flow farther enough to get through these, so I'm just going to have to use another water source here. But this water source is placed there for a reason, so that it would emulate the same distance and the same amount flowing out. That's key for later on. So what you get is this interference pattern, which kind of looks like this over here. So we can see that interference. So you get the most intense spots here, 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 and they're gradually decreasing in intensity as you get away from the most intense. And then you get these little dead zones where there's almost nothing. And that's pretty much what this gives you. Now the way it works is basically, because the way water in Minecraft is, it kind of has a really strange interaction with itself, where it kind of doubles. It has this sort of doubling effect every now and then, and you get this kind of interference pattern. It's really profound over here with water positioned in specific positions, places. You get this really odd pattern, and as you can see, it forms the interference pattern. And as I just graphed it out here with different levels of intensity. Basically, that's what I've done here, is I've taken this and then just turned it into a graph of levels in intensity. Now this is the original, with 1 block difference between each intensity, and this one's just a little bit different. So 5 for the most intense, 4 for a little bit less, 3 for a bit less, 2 for a bit less, and then 1 for almost negligible, almost nothing. So as we can see, this actually is quite an accurate representation of what we get with an interference pattern, which is actually quite cool. A little bit different to what you'd normally imagine. Now, the arrows have disappeared. But what I had here before was a very interesting little experiment that I conducted, which used the bow and arrow here as a form of particle acting as a wave at the same time. Now, the way I did this was a little bit interesting. What I had was an armor stand passing back and forth here with constant rotation, and it's just moving across with motion, and then when it got to a point, it went back over here. And every now and then, at random points in time, this little randomizer here would just pick out a random point in time every about 10 seconds, and at that point, it would just shoot an arrow. Like that. And this took a long time, and basically what I ended up with was the interference pattern. Now I'll actually recreate this experiment, and I'll stick it in once it's done. Okay, so I just finished the experiment there, and I hope you saw that. As you know, as it passed by, we could see that it kept the arrows launching in. Oh, and they're all disappearing now, but you can kind of see that interference pattern just there before. But yeah, they're disappearing. Bugger. Oh well. But yeah, it's actually kind of interesting how it forms that interference pattern. It's a pity they're disappearing, but at the start, I'm pretty sure you got a glimpse of it just then. But yeah, it's actually kind of interesting how this interference pattern forms and actually matches with the water one over there. So the randomization within Minecraft over here that I've got, with just picking a random number from a scoreboard and then using that as just this armor stand moving across and then shooting it at that point in time. It's actually quite interesting, and I mean it's not a valid experiment. It does represent it quite well in that we can see this interference pattern. However, it's not quite as accurate as I'd love it to be, but it's still really quite cool. And I feel like it provides some insight into the world of quantum mechanics, even through a game of Minecraft, and it's quite interesting. It's something quite different. But yeah, this one's a bit of a short episode today, and it's a little bit of a different one, an experimental one, so to speak. But yeah, as I hope you guys have enjoyed this, even though it is a little bit wacky and a little bit different. But as always, hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys in the nearest of futures.